Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, Governor Bentley is in a turf war. Also, the V-Team will take a look at charter schools. And Speaker Hubbard and former Governor Riley accused Senator Shelby of being involved in a shakedown routine. No, you didn't. Yes, they did. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics, with your host, Bill Brett, and the V-Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to the Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Recently, Governor Bentley has been pummeled like a second-rate prize fighter. They have gone after him on even the mere suggestion of raising taxes. A group called the Free Market Alliance has come after him on the internet, even launching a petition. What is this all about, Susan?
It's not just this group. There's several groups, including people, websites like Yellowhammer that are coming after him. I don't think it's just the budget. I really think this is a coordinated effort to have Bentley's favorability ratings decline between now and October. Any of us that have been through this kind of attack can see this one coming.
Baron, do you think this has anything to do with the Hubbard trial?
I do. Looking at it objectively, looking at it from an outsider's perspective, what the governor is beginning to go through is only going to continue to grow and swell with time. What the last thing Mike Hubbard needs, and those that are friendly to Mike Hubbard, that are friends of his, the last thing in the world he needs is a governor with 70 or 80% approval rating, or more importantly, trustworthy rating, standing on the stand, testifying against Mike Hubbard and alleging that he did criminal things or answering questions in a manner that would lead a jury to conclude he did criminal things. Because trustworthiness of a witness is key. They're not going to know any of these other people who testify. They're not going to know anything about them, but they will know who Governor Bentley is.
I mean, Claire, they've been particularly brutal over at the State House to the governor this past week.
Oh, they have. And, the interesting thing is this whole Free Market Alliance is really spearheaded by Paul Reynolds, who's the national committee man for the state of Alabama, but he has very much always been in Governor Riley and Mike Hubbard's corner. And then former Senator Scott Beeson is also working for them as well.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked. I mean, I know Scott would be an anti-tax guy, but Scott Beeson supported Robert Bentley when nobody supported him. And now for that group to turn on him, that's a bad thing, Susan, to turn on people that you've supported in the past, I think.
I would think so. I would, that's something that loyalty in this business is really not there. There's a few people that are loyal, whether, they've supported people before or kept their word, but it's just a bad sign when people start turning on one another.
It's just unfortunate, and I think what y'all all have said, it really looks like it's apparent that it's kind of all lining up, ginning towards October 15th.
And I haven't heard Scott actually say anything against the governor personally, but just that he's in bed with those guys still.
Well, he needs a job.
Yeah, well.
Paycheck for him.
That's all right. Integrity can't be bought. Or maybe it can.
In this business.
We did have something that happened last week that was a reflection of our past and hopefully a reflection of our future. And that was the celebration or the commemoration of the 50-year march on Selma. It was really a spectacular event. Claire, what was your take on it?
Well, I thought it was, it was very good for Alabama. And of course, it was amazing to have two presidents there, 98 members of Congress. I know that the governor and them did something here on Sunday for all the members of Congress, and people from all over the United States of America were here.
Susan, one of the controversial things there is, President Bush got a small smattering of applause, but Governor Bentley actually got booed. Was that appropriate?
I don't believe it was. I think that was over the top. But, from what I heard in the press room yesterday, it was so loud they could hear it all the way back to the press areas. So yeah, I mean, Alabama is not so much an Obama state. Okay, I mean that's just the honest truth of it. But I think booing a sitting governor is just a little over the top.
Egregious.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good man. He is not a racist by any stretch of the imagination or anything else. But it was so great to see all those people coming over the bridge. I mean, would it move you at all?
It's an essential part of American history.
Right.
I mean, if you line up the 10 or 15 greatest moments in American history, the civil rights era has to be in that list. And Selma sort of epitomizes that entire era. It sort of is what kicked off the entire era, and in many ways changed the face of the United States and led to somebody like Barack Obama being able to be president. So nobody's discounting that. I think the best thing was it went off without a hitch.
Right.
There were no major disruptions.
Right.
There were a few little small protests here and there, but there was nobody that really was able to dominate the protest and get any kind of news coverage or elevate themselves above the event.
I thought it was Barack Obama's, perhaps his best speech ever. I mean, I thought he really, he just shined that day.
He did, and one of the things that I was most impressed with was John Lewis in his speech says, who was there who walked across the bridge the first time and said, if you had told me that day I would be standing here today introducing the first African-American president, I would have thought you were crazy.
We've come a long way in just 50 years.
That's correct.
And I think people still see Alabama as a backward state because of some things we pandered, but really, this is a great state, and people, we've grown a lot. Something else that, I thought it was emotional for those people who had been there. And I heard from a friend of mine out in Kansas who said when he witnessed that as a 12-year-old boy, he broke down and cried. And just how that was emotional for blacks, whites, all types of people. I thought it was a good event. Something that's come up in the legislature this week, charter schools, they just flew right through. We've got them. What do you think, Barron?
We'll have to wait and see what it does. I have some major concerns with the bill. I think, as a Republican, I'm a big fan of local control over local schools. That's something I've always advocated for. The major piece of the charter school legislation that I don't like, there's several things I don't like, but the major piece is there's a state appeals board called the commission in the bill that gets to overrule a local school system. Mm-hmm. And I don't see how you're supposed to force a charter school on a local school system that doesn't want the charter school. How on earth are they going to operate within that framework? I think the commission's a bad idea. I'm not a fan of charter schools. I don't think they're necessarily. There are other ways to attack the school problem if you want to really sit down and roll up your sleeves and get to work. I don't think charter school is the answer, but we have them, and we'll see what happens.
Well, the superintendents were against it. The school board association was against it. The people that were really for it were BCA and the BCA affiliates. But Claire, noticeably absent was the AEA, wasn't it?
They had some folks there. They did. They had some folks there. And of course, I think the ACLU was also lobbying against this. I believe the Southern Poverty Law Center, there were a lot of people up there. And then one component that did not pass, which I think probably was taken out in the Senate, was the virtual schools, because we really already have virtual schools in these rural areas all across the state of Alabama now, for the most part.
All right, we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more news and discussion.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
Welcome to Alabama's newest entertainment destination, Wind Creek, Wetumpka. The perfect escape for date night, a getaway with your friends, or a relaxing poolside cocktail. Whether it's a day trip to enjoy the best steak in Alabama or a romantic weekend, the finest Southern hospitality is just a short drive away. Wind Creek, Wetumpka. Find your winning moment.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. And welcome to you, Jack Campbell.
Thanks, Bill.
Glad to have you this morning.
Glad to be here, Clarine. Baron.
Emails released as a result of Hubbard's attorney, Mark White, requesting them from the state have revealed a lot of things that Hubbard would have liked to have remained secret. One of those revelations is an email conversation between former Governor Bob Riley and Speaker Mike Hubbard, in which the pair accuse Senator Richard Shelby of running a shakedown racket, a shakedown routine. Jack, you read the emails. What do you think?
Well, if I'm Richard Shelby or Ray Cole, I'm a little upset about it. First of all, I don't think any of that's true, but the emails themselves prove that Riley and Hubbard were talking back and forth about developing some scheme in which Mike could get paid by Bob Riley and then hire a lobbyist for $1 a year. And it was so convoluted and complicated. I think even Governor Riley was a little confused by it. But it was clearly Mike was trying to figure a way that he could continue making money as Speaker.
I mean, he was resentful, wasn't he, Barron?
Yeah, that's the thing I noticed first. I read those emails several times, and each time I read them, it became a little more clear what was going on. The first thing I noticed was that Mike was jealous. Mike Hubbard was jealous that he believed this shakedown routine was going on, and he wasn't getting any of it. The second thing I noticed was then they develop a plan not to blow the whistle on a scheme that would be illegal if it was true, and I don't believe it's true, but not to blow the whistle on it, not to investigate it, not to draw attention to it, but to mimic it,
right?
to replicate it right here in the state of Alabama. It was preposterous.
Claire, what's your word for that?
It's egregious. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, that really is. It's just sad. And how they just completely lay it out and say, oh, well, if they've been doing this, we need to figure out exactly how to do it. And we need to get our ethics commissioner, Mr. Selma, rubber stamp it.
And, you know, interestingly, Mark White is so upset about these emails being released. So he's the guy that requested more information to make what specifically do these indictments mean. And when the prosecution laid it out, he's like, ooh, be careful what you wish for, as they say.
This is this one really here just shows how a pattern, and you would, as your attorney say, a pattern and practice of trying to look for ways to milk money out of government. I mean, Claire,
or the private business. I mean, it's nothing but greed. It's just the biggest greed factor I've ever seen.
Well, one of the things is Mike met with FedEx, up in D.C., and FedEx didn't want to have anything to do with him because he was a public official. I mean, FedEx knew better.
Yeah.
But seems like no one else did.
Well, the other thing you'll notice is if you look at the history, or if you look at what happened after those two emails going back and forth between Hubbard and Riley, they emailed each other about this supposed scheme, how would it work, who would we get to do it, and the conclusion they drew was that the money would be kicked back in the form of campaign contributions and then marked up services that somebody else would then kick back money from. That's exactly what they did. Now, I'm not saying they engaged in a shakedown routine like they were alleging Richard Shelby engaged in. Again, I don't believe Richard Shelby engaged in a shakedown routine. They seem to believe that. But what they were outlining, you could look at their campaign reports later and say, my goodness, it looks like they did exactly what they were outlining.
Right. I mean, this was planned from the beginning.
Planned, plotted, schemed, and acted upon.
Particularly when you look at the price of a poll that was conducted for candidates for the legislature at $8,500. They don't cost that much as a rule. And I don't believe they asked so many questions that it warranted paying a pollster $8,500, maybe $5,000, $6,000.
Well, that goes back to that Brett Burek thing in the majority strategies. We see an email in there where Brett Burek says, we don't really want to do business with Craftsmaster because they're so expensive, right?
Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that some of these same vendors, pollsters and others, were doing business during the 2010 cycle and charging substantially less for their services than they were during the 2014 cycle. Now, either the cost of a poll has gone up 25%, which I don't believe the case is, or there's a kickback built into it. And I think it'd be interesting if I was a prosecutor to follow those dollars and see, was there a kickback being paid on these services, and was this a shakedown routine?
Well, I mean, this is one of the big things that Hubbard is charged with, is using, at the time when he was chairman of the ALGOP, he laundered money through this Brett Burek with Majority Strategies, also with the Tim Howell Group, which was another one. So it's just all over the place. But we can get to all that.
Yeah, I need to say one thing.
Okay.
Last week when we were talking about the governor's State of the State address and how there was folks sitting behind him, Kay Ivey and Del Martian. Mike, I characterized Mike Hubbard as a convict, and I erroneously spoke. He's merely an indictee, and perhaps one day will be, but he's not yet.
You know, just a mere.
Thank you for clearing the air on that.
Some folks would say that's wishful thinking.
Distinction without a difference.
Well, I want to clear that
You know,
up.
speaking of optics, we all remember the pep rally that Hubbard had the day after he was indicted on 23 felony counts of public corruption. He holds this big pep rally, and in the center of it is your friend and mine, Baron, the hair himself, Mike Rogers.
Mr. Milquetoast. Yeah, Mike Rogers came out, spoke, and just for those that don't recall, accused our Republican Attorney General Luther Strange of engaging in Chicago-style gutter politics and trying to skin up Mike Hubbard in advance of the 2018 gubernatorial election so that Luther Strange could be governor instead of Mike Hubbard. It was something we widely criticized.
Well, you know, one of the stories we reported earlier this week is just mere days after Mike Rogers appeared with Mike Hubbard on stage, he received the maximum allowable under the law from Bob Riley to his congressional campaign. A month later, he received the same amount from a Riley-friendly group. Looks like it was a little payday, maybe, Jack.
That should not be any surprise to y'all. I mean,
No?
really? No, and you know, and I like Mike. I've worked with him when he was in the legislature in Congress, but what he did and the comments he made about the Attorney General are unconscionable, and he should not have talked about our Attorney General like that, who's a Republican in the state of Alabama.
I mean, here's a guy conducting possibly the biggest white-collar investigation in the history of the state, and he's up there making public statements about what a bad guy Luther is, and then mere days later he takes $2,600, which is the maximum federal contribution you can accept from Bob Riley, and another $2,600 from the Welborn folks in East Alabama, who are good people, by the way.
Yeah.
But it smells like a reward.
It does, and we're told that Riley is the one who actually called up Mike Rogers and said, Mike, we need you down here. You know, your buddy's in trouble. We need you to come down.
Probably did. I mean, same thing that he was doing on the Alabama GOP chairman's race. The former Governor Riley was, you know, making phone calls for the Alabama GOP chairman's race. I mean, this is crazy
I
that he
hope
gets
Governor
involved.
Riley has an ample supply of Aleve for all the arm twisting he does and gets arthritis.
We're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with some more good stuff. Stay tuned.
The V is sponsored by MediaWorks Communications, quality video production and marketing services.
Welcome to Alabama's newest entertainment destination, Wind Creek, Wetumpka, the perfect escape for date night, a getaway with your friends, or a relaxing poolside cocktail. Whether it's a day trip to enjoy the best steak in Alabama or a romantic weekend, the finest Southern hospitality is just a short drive away. Wind Creek, Wetumpka. Find your winning moment.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. I'm beginning to think I may be a little sadistic or masochistic. I'm really feeling this way because I have now read Mike Hubbard's book 3.5 times.
Well, you're the only person that's done read it that much.
I have read Storming the State House, or as we like to call it, Stealing the State House, 3.5 times. And every time I go back and find more nuggets. During the period when Mike is writing this book, he is shaking down friends and acquaintances for money on his behalf. But here in the book, he's writing about how they've cleaned up the government. They've enforced all these ethics laws, and they are really doing things that the Democrats never have done. They were doing things the Democrats never have done.
They perfected what the people they learned from. They perfected the system.
And they did it in a much shorter period of time. In 4 years, he's done.
I hate to see what they would do if they had 136 years to do it.
The name of the state would be the Yellow Hubbard State. Well, I mean, it was a little disingenuous, don't you think, Barry?
It was, and look, the man himself in his own emails released by the prosecution, he points out how ridiculous and ludicrous these statements are in his book. Because he says, ethics laws, who proposed these things? What were we thinking?
Right.
I mean, it's clear that it puts in context everything they've done the last 4 years. Everything they've done is to look good.
Yeah, it's all
for show. Appearances, knowing that they're not ever going to try to live up to it or to stay within the bounds. He thought, look, I've got the U.S. Attorney on my side, Laura Canary, wife of Billy Canary. I've got the Attorney General on my side, Republican Luther Strange. Nobody's going to come investigating me. Lids up. Lids
Jim
open.
Sumner at Ethics Commission.
Jim Sumner at Ethics Commission.
Clearly a homer.
Yeah. And so why would they try to follow the law? No one was ever going to look at them.
Well, as someone told me, when Matt Hart looks at you cross-eyed, don't just walk away. Run away.
Well, you know, it's interesting in his book how he wrote or had written what a corrupt government does. It hurts economic development.
Right.
It instills distrust in the taxpayers.
Yeah.
And I think that's
what?
very important. I think that's very important, considering what we're looking at in Alabama and how Alabama has not bumped up over the curve amongst the other southern states. And at this juncture, I think it may be due to all the corruption.
Well, it's been. I mean, the FBI right on their website says that one of the leading causes of poor economic development is public corruption.
Well, let's just ask the obvious question. Who the hell writes a book like this anyway? Honestly. Who writes a vanity book like this when you win the Speaker of the House of a small southern state? I mean, that ought to tell you right there, the man has megalomania issues, honestly.
Well, Billy Canary arranged for him to go up to D.C. and promote his book in D.C., and then you got Chris Christie invites him up to New Jersey to talk about it. I mean, I think he can show Christie a few tricks on how to run politics in Jersey, right?
We thought Jersey had perfected it, but guess what?
They're
amateurs compared to these guys.
And he had them out everywhere at the Republican convention, and he had Alabama lobbyists hosting all these things to pass these books out. It was unreal.
It's embarrassing.
Well, we were sitting at lunch one day, I won't say who, but a couple of aides, and they went, Mike's just announced the name of his book. And it's like, what? Storming the State House, and everyone just broke up. I mean, it was like, really? That's going to be the name of your book? And you notice he's not standing in front of the State House, right?
I have a friend that has a saying, this is cock of the walk today, feather duster tomorrow. So.
Well, that group of emails reveals so much that we never knew, and we knew a lot. We knew a lot that was going on. Now, Mark White has come out, and he filed another motion for what I call more defined statement of facts about the indictments. Mark White probably got another reply from Matt Hart and Van Davis that he didn't like, Barron.
Well, he probably did. And here's the thing. I think what he's asking for is a speaking indictment like you would see in federal court, where it goes line by line, and this witness said this, and this witness said that. Here's why they're charging you. I don't see the harm in providing him that. And reasonable legal minds disagree. I've had this conversation with 4 or 5 different lawyers. Some said that would be a disaster for the state to do. Some said, well, I would go ahead and give it to him. I'm of the school that I would probably go ahead and give it to him. Smack him around a little bit more. Those 85 exhibits stung so badly, embarrassed him so badly. You should hear the conversation among politicos, representatives, senators right now. Totally different than it was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
If they were to give an all-out speaking indictment, I think he'd be done.
I mean, at the State House, Claire, it's sort of just turned on its head, hasn't it?
It has, and it was done on a Friday or Thursday. I don't recall now, but it had the whole entire weekend to penetrate through, where they really couldn't get their PR machine up, ginning and operating. And you're right, it just really turned a lot of heads. And I've talked to a lot of different members, and they're like,
didn't Mark White criticize
timing.
The prosecution for the timing,
Yeah.
even though that date was agreed upon in advance by both parties.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the state files and he says, oh, it's politically motivated. You filed 3 days before the session. That was the deadline, Mark.
Right.
The one you agreed on.
He forgot about that.
He's so
Well,
disingenuous.
when you
I'm
go
sorry.
to the Urban Dictionary and under the phrase white lies,
Mark White.
Mark White's picture's there.
It's been interesting. Some other lawyers, and I've talked to many as well, said, it's going to be very interesting because traditionally when Mark has a high-profile case, he's got somebody really strong to back him up, and he doesn't have that in this Mike Hubbard case.
Well, everybody else has already got all
They're
their
all
attorneys,
taken.
right?
Criminal lawyers are very hard to come by in Alabama these days.
These days.
That's because criminals aren't, I guess.
AL Reporter has engaged in the full lawyer employment program.
Exactly.
Making sure all the lawyers
They
have
need
a
to
job.
thank y'all.
Well, we need some more advertisers. That's what we need, Jack. Of course, now that the trial lawyers are under the thumb of the supermajority, they're not as eager to advertise anymore. But, Jack, what are you hearing on the street about this whole deal?
Well, like Barron said, the entire landscape changed once these emails became public on February 27th. People that had stood behind Mike are now scratching their heads saying, wow. People that were his supporters. Now, they're too scared to raise their hand and call for reorganization of the House because they know the repercussions of publicly going after Mike. But privately, they will tell you this is a big deal and it's very bad for Mike.
It's going to damage the state in the long run, though. That's
sure
the problem.
it is.
And even representatives I've talked to who have always been Mike Hubbard supporters, who remain Mike Hubbard supporters, will privately, candidly, off the record tell you he will not survive this. They got to look forward at a future without a Mike Hubbard in government.
We're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch news stories every day at alreporter.com, and you can view us every Sunday on your ABC affiliate throughout the state. Thank you for watching, and have a great Sunday.